What do you really need to play Star Citizen in 2023? The official minimum specs on the website are complete garbage. They're wrong. I've tested them this year and the CPU is completely unplayable. So in this video, we'll tell you what exactly you need to get in the game at kind of a 30 FPS mark. CPU, GPU, RAM, storage, all sorts of stuff. So if you like this sort of stuff, performance of Star Citizen, subscribe and let's get into some testing. Let's start off with the CPU. It's by far the most important factor for Star Citizen performance. If you're sitting there thinking, why is this game not running well? It's likely going to be your CPU. In the past, I was recommending an i5-8400, which was a 6-core part. I found that actually over the last year, the game has got a bit more demanding in certain areas, especially Lorville, the city. It's now harder to run. And so what I'm now recommending is that really you need 6 cores and 12 threads as a bare minimum on these older CPUs. And so I have upgraded to the i7-8700. Now that will get you around the 30 FPS mark, but it's going to still have dips below, but it's pretty good and pretty playable as a base minimum. On the Intel side as well, I've also recently tested the i5-10400, which is effectively the same CPU as the i7-8700. It's got 6 cores, 12 threads, clock's about the same, and performance is pretty similar. So on the Intel side, that is about as far back as you want to go. You might be able to overclock some old i7s crazily, but I think really the 6 cores and 12 threads is going to be where you want to stay. And then on the AMD side, we've got to go up as far as the R5 3600. Ryzen 3rd 3000 series are as low as you want to go. The 2000 series just doesn't really cut it anymore, and that way the AMD and the Intel CPUs I'm recommending there perform around the same mark. GPUs are fairly straightforward compared to CPUs. Really anything from the 1660 upwards on the Nvidia side is fine. So the 1660, the 1660 Ti and the 1660 Super, they all perform around the 30 FPS mark. I've done a lot of testing with those. The 1070 is also a good option. It's a bit slower in some cases, but it's got 8 GB of VRAM, which does help. We'll come back to VRAM in a moment. I was previously recommending the 1060 6 GB, but with the clouds now in most places of the cities at least, that is a little bit far behind. But if you're willing to turn off the clouds completely, that can still target around the 30 FPS mark. And then on the AMD side, it's a bit tricky because older AMD cards just don't seem to play that well with Star Citizen right now. We've got this thing where something like a 5600 XT should perform better than all of those cards that I've just mentioned, but actually it kind of doesn't, and it seems to not cope as well with having 6 GB of VRAM as the Nvidia card. So there's these kind of stutters and slowdowns in the cities as you're swapping things in and out of memory, and it just seems to be worse. The 1% lows are worse on the AMD side. I've tested a few different AMD cards and none of them seem to be great, but that probably would be around the minimum. Maybe the 5700 XT would be a better option. It's got a bit more VRAM, but yeah, it's tricky. It's likely just down to the fact that we are using the CryEngine / Lumberyard / Star engine. They're all the same engine, but traditionally older AMD cards didn't always perform as well as Nvidia in CryEngine games, so it could just be down to that. In general, with VRAM, yeah, 6 GB and upwards is fine, but like I say, 8 GB, you have less of these kind of slowdown moments. And then the major thing that's worth talking about on a minimum spec build as well is upscaling. Now, Nvidia and AMD now provide upscaling options in their control panels and software, and so they can be a really good option to basically run the game at a lower resolution, so 720p maybe, and upscale it to 1080p, so you get the performance as if you're running at 720p, but you get the, in theory, the visual quality of 1080p. It isn't quite as good visually, and in general upscaling I think works better when you're upscaling at higher resolution, so say 1440p to 4K. There's just more detail in the picture to upscale, so it won't necessarily look as good. But if you're looking to play this game with a really old or low-end GPU, upscaling can be really quite helpful. Let's talk about RAM. Now, RAM is a bit controversial in Star Citizen. I've seen quite a lot of people say 32 GB is the minimum, and I would disagree. I've done a fair amount of testing on this. I play regularly on my minimum spec system with 16 gigabytes. And yes, 32 gigabytes is better. You get less, again, swapping in and out of actual memory this time. So 32 gigabytes will be smoother, but the game is playable on 16 gigabytes. So I would say 16 gigabytes is the minimum. Again, 32 gigabytes is better. The one thing you might have to kind of pay attention to is if you're suddenly crashing in the cities. I occasionally get messages from people saying, I'm not sure what's going on, I just seem to crash in, say, Horizon. And often it is down to being on 16 gigabytes of RAM, but your page file isn't large enough. So you can manually change the size of your page file rather than let Windows do it for you. And the game may require you to do that. So that is one thing that's probably worth knowing. If you're going in with 16 gigabytes of RAM, you may well crash in certain areas and you may need to set your page file yourself. RAM speed is another factor in this. Now, whatever you've got, it will work, but the faster the RAM, the better. This is quite consistent. I've tested this on all sorts of different systems. If you can get more speed out of your RAM, that will definitely help. Make sure your profiles, XMP profiles or Expo profiles are set, but if you want to tune your RAM as well, if you've really got an old system but you're thinking, oh, how can I get more performance out of the CPU and the RAM combo, tuning the RAM can be quite significant, but can take quite a lot of time. But the faster the RAM, the better the performance will be, for sure. Storage is quite straightforward. You absolutely cannot play this game with a hard drive. I've been saying that for years now, and everybody says that. It is a game that requires, despite what CRG's misleading statement on the website says, it requires a solid state drive. But it doesn't require anything more than that. So in the testing I've done, there is no performance benefit from going from a standard solid state drive all the way up to really quick M.2 NVMe drives. It just doesn't make any difference to performance itself, and it makes very little difference to actual loading times. It can make a small amount of difference, but we're talking seconds. So you just need a bog standard SSD, and they're now so cheap, even the cheap ones will kind of work fine. You just need to get one of those. You've got no excuse, I don't think, in 2023 to be running on a hard drive for your game. So just go out and get yourself a solid state drive. Let's also just quickly talk about laptops, because some people will be playing on a laptop or will want to play on a laptop. Now, laptops generally are underpowered compared to the equivalent desktop parts, but I did buy a laptop for science for this channel, and I did do some testing, and I did find that with a 11800H i7 CPU and with a 3050 Ti, it would perform around the same as my minimum spec system, maybe a little bit better than the old i5 and 1060 that I had at that point. So that isn't a particularly top of the end laptop. Now, the graphics card in there is pretty low end, but you will, again, like we're talking about here, you will need to prioritize the CPU if you're going to do this. If you're going to get a laptop, you're going to need as fast a CPU as you possibly can get, because that was the major holding back factor for that system. It's going to cost you money. Laptops, obviously, you're paying for the screen and everything. They cost more money, but I just want to acknowledge the fact that it is playable on laptops, this game, but yeah, you'll have to prioritize CPU. Another thing to just quickly mention is cloud gaming services. Now, you can't play on like Nvidia, GeForce or anything like that. It has to be a game that's been, I guess, fully released and then is compatible with their platform. But there is a service called Shadow that allows you to play on the cloud. It's quite expensive and performance is not great, even on their kind of power tier with higher end GPU and CPU. It just is not great at all. So I would discount that. Basically, it's not worth really looking into. If you want to chat about any of this stuff, come over to my Discord where loads of people will be able to help you out in terms of getting a PC that will run the game pretty well. Thank you for watching. See you soon.